Hello, I'm Cass Dowding, and this is the Sentimental Gardener podcast, a gardening podcast where we explore the human connection with plants, gardens, and the natural world around us. Today's guest is someone who has spent her entire career asking a fundamental question. How do we shape the landscapes we live in, not just so they're beautiful, but so they serve people, ecology, and the future? Fleur Flanery has pursued this question at every scale. As an executive in the ACT government, she managed the urban forest. That's over 1 million trees across Canberra. Before that, she worked for environmental organisations, Greening Australia, Land and Water Australia, listening to visionaries and asking, what if we did this differently? And now, as the Director of Outlandish Ventures, she is pursuing the same question through curation and conversation. Through events, immersive travel experiences, and the Australian Landscape Conference, a biennial gathering that brings together world-leading landscape designers, ecologists, artists, and visionaries to explore how design can meet the challenges of our time. But here's what matters. This isn't abstract thinking. Fleur's belief that landscape reflects our values, that it can become a repair vehicle for connection, that comes from somewhere deep. It starts with a little girl in a farming community holding flowers while her mum picked them. It includes a goblin named Jimmy who lived in the garden and taught her that landscapes were alive with imagination. It moves through her grandma, remaking a garden after grief. And it winds through a lifetime of noticing, what does this space say about what we value and what could it become? She finds her own design language. Around the age of 50, she runs most days and she sits on local boards and councils asking the same questions at the grassroots level. And she reminds us that landscapes, whether they're a council park, a street corner or a backyard, are never neutral. They're always telling a story. So a big warm welcome today to my guest on the Sentimental Gardener podcast, Fleur Flanery. Fleur, thanks for being my guest today on the Sentimental Gardener podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
I want to start, if we can, where I start most of the podcasts, with your earliest garden memories. And I understand that you grew up in a farming area.
I've been very fortunate to live all my life in a farming area, and farms and landscape are really central to the way I see land and love land. So it's not just as a commodity, it's as a way of life. And just to reflect on your question about earliest memories are walking around gardens with my parents' garden with my mum and just doing odd jobs like holding flowers when she was picking them. When I was quite young and learning to write, she and a friend invented an idea of goblins in the garden. And my goblin was called Jimmy Goblin. And so I'd leave little notes out to the goblin and the goblin who lived in the garden, which sounds completely nonsensical in some ways. But in other ways, it gave me just this idea that things were alive in a garden. And I have really carried that through all, my whole life. Like, it can be insects, it can be reptiles. Gardens are alive and they're imaginative.
What type of flowers did your mum grow?
Well, it was a garden that was created in the 1940s and then reimagined in the 1950s, 60s. So first of all, the reason I pinpoint those two dates, it's when my grandparents were married, pre-war, pre-World War II, and irrigation really wasn't, polypipe wasn't a thing in gardens. So they had plants that you had to survive without water, and they didn't really have any lawn that you would call a lawn. My grandfather was tragically killed in a bushfire on the farm when he was quite a young man, like 42, and my dad was 17. And my grandmother then set about, my father said she cried for 2 years, and then she just set about remaking this garden. And she had a lady called Kath Carr who had worked with Edna Walling. And Kath Carr is some of her work is in a really beautiful book by Holly Forsyth Kerr called Remembered Gardens. And Kath did a series of gardens in the area, and one of those was my grandmother. She was my grandparents. She was a good friend of theirs, and her ideas were based on Edna Walling. So you can certainly see an idea of Edna Walling with its own vernacular. So I actually didn't answer your question at all about plants. What plants were in the garden? There were palm trees and actually Lombardy poplars, yes, and Celtis trees. And then it became lawns, walls, Ridgeron daisies, quite hardy shrubs, but not too much of the shrub layer. It's interesting when you think about it as a child. I do remember daisies and freesias quite a bit. But now when I go there, it's a mature garden, it's getting close to 90 years old. So big trees, and it's probably now up for rethinking in terms of its planting schemes, just because they're starting to age.
So you've been back since?
Oh, I go back all the time.
Oh,
yeah, my parents still live there. Well, my father died, but my mum still lives there.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. And that's a new concept for me through talking to people, that gardens actually need editing over time, and that the trees and things have a lifespan. So that's really interesting, that it's made it to, what did you say, 90 years down the track?
90 years. I think sometimes... Well, all things take a while to see their real repercussions. So we have a bore water. It's irrigated with bore water, which is limey. It's from the area is known for having limestone, and so I can see some of the effect of 30 years of irrigation on those, and some don't survive and some do. So it just is. It is a garden of its place. But I think you are starting to see some of the effect of irrigation on some of the trees.
Interesting. Okay. So these early memories of gardens, you've gone and studied, as I said, horticulture and landscape architecture, but I understand it wasn't a straight path out of school and going to study and have that interest in working with gardens, was it? What was the journey there?
The journey was not necessarily... like a step, I want to be this thing. I left school after my HSC, and I did a degree in communication because it was the in thing, and I'd been asked to be the weather girl. So I thought, oh, that's good, weather girl, and I could do communication. And then, so I did communication and worked in that area for a little while. But subsequently, I got married and had children really quite young. I had my son at just 23, and so I couldn't really do all those things in communication and be out and about, and so I thought I'd do something that I liked doing. I don't know if I necessarily thought it would be my life's calling, and I started doing horticulture, and then I'd always been interested in landscape architecture, though I hadn't maybe thought about it as a profession. I'd really thought about it as something other people did. I didn't really know that much about it, but it was offered at the University of Canberra, which sadly it's not there anymore. And so I did horticulture, landscape architecture, and then arboriculture.
Okay.
And then I actually got quite depressed because I was like, oh my gosh, I've got all these degrees and what will I do with them? And so it took a little, I think I got a bit... maybe insecure or not thinking that I could actually... I passed with honours and in my landscape architecture, and I thought, oh, great, I can design. And then suddenly when you're challenged with what are you designing, I started to really re-question, am I actually a designer?
Okay.
I think in reflecting on it, I wish I had have stayed with it a bit longer because I do love the design component. But with young children, I went into... what I knew I could do pretty well and, earn an income. I worked for Land and Water Australia, so in a role as a communication officer, and then Greening Australia with environmental interests. As I said, it wasn't a straightforward career trajectory because I was really interested in listening to people, and maybe I'm a lazy academic, I don't really know, but I tend to listen to something and then read their work rather than read their work and then listen to them. So when I was with Land and Water Australia and working for Professor Andrew Campbell, we listened to the most fascinating people, like all these environmentalists and other really amazing thinkers. And so then I just thought, oh, I'd like to work for that person, that person, that person. And that's how I stepped through the first part of my career. And I definitely didn't run out of people, but I sort of thought, oh, I better do something, to make my own career a bit more of a stepping stone. So then I started working for the ACT government, managing all their open space and urban forest.
Wow, that's incredible. Like, I can see the threads of it all coming together, but like you said, you didn't step out and want to be something, if that makes sense. But it sounds like you're just curious about the next thing. Is that right?
Well,
and then you go, oh, that's interesting, I might explore that. Or
I don't, possibly. When I was being interviewed by Professor Campbell, he looked at my degrees and my interests and said, do you have a misguided sense about what you want to do? And I was like, probably. But I said, no, there's just lots of things I want to do, and I haven't really refined it. And I guess if I think about design or landscape design or design of any, you've got to stay with something. Like, you don't just start out being the best painter in the world or necessarily the best designer. You've got to stay with something and get the highs and the insecurities and your own language. And I only really feel I've got my own language in terms of a design context, really, at sort of 50 or something. Okay. I kind of understand what I like and what I don't like. I mean, with Outlandish, which just, you haven't asked this question, but I'm going to say it anyway. So it is a word that we definitely didn't make the word outlandish, but for me it resonated because it was for outstanding landscapes, and then the ventures it's an adventure. I really, my dad died and about 8 years ago, and I wanted to do something for myself, and so I thought I will, pick up the Australian Landscape Conference and go with that. So it's really only since I've been able to look at what other people do and think about what's my message, what am I doing, and then you get your own language, or I found my own language, I think, in some ways, in terms of a design.
It's like that growing up, isn't it, in so many parts? Like, you look at clothing design or housing design, and then you try on bits and pieces. I don't know if it's the same for you. And then you go, yeah, that was really nice. Or, as you mature more, you get a lot more settled in who you are, and there's parts of you that you like accept, and then some of them you're like, no, I was just trying on and that fit or that didn't fit. But it sounds like you really know now.
Well, I mean, I think we all learn, and that's the nice thing about life and what we do, and what you do as well is, as you say, you try a lot on, and maybe you're not sure if that fits or it doesn't fit, but it's really important for me to, when I go to a space or go to a garden I'm not there as a judgment, but to work out if I like something or if I don't like something. And if I don't like something, it's not because it's bad or anything. I now try to be disciplined and break down what it does in terms of, do I feel that whoosh moment? And if I don't feel that moment, why is that? What does it have that's, that I'm not connecting with? And not everyone connects with all spaces. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's just something about how it's put together that you go, that's me or that's not me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with how I'm learning to see gardens, because in the past, having just been brought up in very, that traditional English cottage style garden, or, everything's very straight line. Everything looks the same because I live in suburban Melbourne. So, certain areas or suburbs, they all have the same look, and you can easily think that's normal. I'm doing air quotes. But when I attended the Australian Landscape Conference for the first time this year in 2025, hearing perspectives about garden design from around the world, my mind, it was seriously open so much. At the end of the day, you're swimming. And some of the pictures they showed initially about their garden design, I had like an immediate judgment, like, oh, that's interesting. And I could feel the judgment straight away, like, oh, that's not for me, that's for me. But when they explained the story behind the design, like the sheds, and
Steve Martinez.
Yeah. That has helped me think about so many things. It's been like the catalyst for thinking about how to change and how to push boundaries in gardening. That's what I just see is so valuable in learning to not judge gardens by that's beautiful, that's not beautiful, but the importance of, like what you're saying, take the time to understand how it's made. And I think the more you've spent time doing maybe your own garden or talking to people who've done gardens, do you get the appreciation of what is involved in actually caring for and building that? Is that what studying landscape architecture has helped you in the way that you've led the Australian Landscape Conference, like having that background?
I don't know if formal training in landscape architecture has necessarily helped me with the Australian Landscape Conference.
Okay.
But what I did honours in it, and one thing I found really great and that has helped me as a kind of a lifelong skill is to challenge a rhetoric or to challenge a narrative. And I was very badly behaved at school, not because I was necessarily, in inverted commas, naughty. I just was incredibly interested in lots of things. And I probably had a bit of, I have obsessive things, like I run all the time, when I can. And so it's just having that mind that ticks over, but to put it with discipline that says, what is that saying? How has that idea been formed? What's behind that thinking? So just picking up from the Australian Landscape Conference this year, or 2025, the theme of that was ways of seeing, ways of being, which is obviously borrowed, from a very well-known book, but it really did say something to me. I took a long while in discussions with people about what should a theme be, is a theme important, or what it is. And I thought, no, it really is about how, to me, how the landscape you're in says a lot about what you value and what you don't value. So I look at many country towns, and I'm in Yass, and to me the demise of landscape is, almost criminal, because people are getting these McDonald's-style parks. They're getting places without beauty, places that are just completely devoid of any kind of ecological basis. And even if that's not important to people, having a responsibility about our resources and not being too resource intensive, I think is a very diminished way to live. And some might think that's talking from a point of privilege, but I don't. I've definitely had a privileged life, but I feel that we can do better than making these modular play equipments, a bit of grass and one or two westringias and a lot of lamandras as our contribution to a landscape that we call native. I think that we really feel the metrics about it will cost more to have something that is more beautiful is not necessarily the case. It costs more definitely in thinking and knowing how to look after it. But in terms of how they can be sustaining and how they can have multiple benefits, I think we really need to lift our understanding of that in Australia.
And my experience from hearing that from the Australian Landscape Conference is once you see, you can't unsee.
Yeah.
So the wonderful James Hitchmo and John Hazelwood and the team behind the Test Garden in Melbourne in preparation for Larkburn Darp, it opened my eyes incredibly to that point that now, especially their concept of native gardens, or not just native gardens, but the ability to mix introduced species and Australian natives and create beauty from both. And then spending time with my young kids at parks and then seeing like monocultures, like you said, with lamandra, and my brain just now goes, oh, if they just put something like that or added some colour here, like it could bring, like you said, beauty. I get what you're saying, where it's like it's so much easier just to follow what we've always done and create public realm gardens like that. But it sounds like you, through the conference, are drawing on your contacts and networks and saying, hey, we've got all these ideas of people who are testing and trying that, and let's change it. And it's possible to make change. Is that right? Is that part of your message of bringing those ideas?
Landscape is a really interesting medium to work with because it's not a painting. Like, they talk about landscape as art, and it is an art, but it's ephemeral. It changes from morning to afternoon. The plants, you mix colour and it might fade, or you know something about the properties of paint, but landscape is really challenging because, things live, they grow bigger. They don't grow bigger when you want them to be smaller, and smaller when you want them to be bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, James Hitchmo is a great example of someone that I said to him at the ALC, we're so lucky to have someone like you that really is who likes to think in complex ways. And one of the really interesting things about James's work, and there's many interesting things, is he did some research on colour and the way people respond to colour. So in which he probably got from gambling machines. He probably looked at, gambling machines and the way colour, bing, bing, bing.
Yep.
So if you're looking at some of his work in Melbourne, it is pretty colourful, which is intentional. It's not, oh, he put that together. James has this, some of his research came up with the gardens need 7 colours, and once they have 7 colours, it makes people feel happy or happier. Often, too much tonality, and people look at it and go, oh, that's a bit boring or whatever. Whereas in Melbourne, in the area they're in, they want colour. They are competing for space, and so they want people to go in there and feel immersed pretty quickly. One of the best examples, there's many examples I've seen of James's work, but, the moat around London, the Tower of London, which he did with Nigel Dunnett, it was just overwhelmingly, you just didn't even think about the day. You might have, I might have said to myself, I'm in a hurry, I don't have time to get here. And once I was in there, I was like, oh, I don't care about anything else, nothing. I can miss my plane tonight, doesn't matter. Like, that's the kind of experience that happens when you're in an immersive landscape. And you might get that looking at a painting. It might transport you to a mythical time, but really landscape is when it's good, is immersive.
Yeah.
It totally challenges your mind about how something looks like that. How did that happen? And one of the most interesting things I think that I do is talk to people about, with the beautiful Attila, about how plants grow and things. But there's something always, the more you know, the more you question.
Yes.
You can just keep asking more things, and you can never know enough. My daughter has bought her first house, and although she's grown up with gardens around her, as she says, she just thought it always happened. Like, she never noticed that Mum just disappeared for a couple of hours and came back in, and then, was all dirty and washed her hands, and off we went. But it's just using her as an example. It's new to her, although she's been surrounded by gardeners all her life, and she's interested in things, but it's kind of where to start, what do you do, how does this happen? Why is the hedge not looking like a hedge? Which is, it's valid. I was talking to, some people the other day about just some of the basics are missing these days about how people understand plants. And, Sue Stuart-Smith will say that exactly about life and death, the whole cycle. So I think there's something for everyone in terms of entry level to really experienced, and really asking questions like, how does this happen? How can we get more? If we're saying let's not fertilize, then how do you get your plants to respond and give them health and vitality if you don't use certain fertilizers, or, if you want to stick away from mulches, or, what mulches, all of those things. It sounds pretty dull, but it really does challenge you to think about what you can do.
Yeah. I like to think of it like a spiral, the knowledge that it's not like, up and to the right where, okay, once you've learned everything to learn, hooray, I'm a gardener, I'm a professional, I know it all. It's like a spiral, like you learn the next little bit, but then you come around and again and you're at another level and you're like, oh, well, maybe that didn't work last year. What have we got to do this year? And that's what I love about it in my own journey, that, we're always learning. And you can talk to the most cleverest person who's done studies and they talk about how they're always learning. So it's just so amazing. But I want to ask you, when for you did all of this become a realization, like the power? Was there a moment, or it's just been as you go along?
No, there's definitely no moment. I do know that, people talk about gardens as being relaxing and, take you to something else. I garden nearly every day in some way. Like, I can't walk past a plant without wondering what the plant next to it's doing or why there's something growing there. But for me, it's not a sense of relaxation. It's just a sense of doing. Like, you may not have noticed, but there's no chairs really in my garden because I just don't sit down very often. I work, and I like work.
Yep.
And people garden for different reasons. But for me, some of it's physical, some of it's mental. There was no moment. I'm constantly humbled by people's knowledge. And the thing I love about what I do at the moment is offering a platform to bring people together and they talk. Like, when you're at a break at the Australian Landscape Conference, you can talk to anybody about something.
Yeah.
The presentation that you're in, how, people might not like all the speakers, but they are there and they show what they've done, like effectively a point in time of their life's work. And to me, it's pretty remarkable that someone shares work, it shares their ideas about how they started with something. And I'll use Steve Martino as an example. He was wondering, he lives in Tucson, Arizona, and he was studying architecture and working on a building site, and wondering why they were building a kind of an English-style garden in Tucson, Arizona. And he was like, jeepers, look at the plants out there. They're growing and we have to pump all this stuff on it. So he started his own thought process by just asking a really obvious question. Gosh, these plants are taking ages to grow and those ones are growing really easily. Could something happen because of this? And what I find interesting is when I look at his gardens, they don't look naturalistic to me because I have a different view of what naturalism is. But to him, in that area, they're absolutely naturalistic because it is all about, water and gravel and materials and things. So there's such a big range of ways that you could present an idea. And I just think it's incredibly boring if someone just, goes for something that hasn't really been, that you want to think about it. Creating something that you could just roll out easily is achievable. Yes, you can do it, but somehow making your own voice in it is a nice thing to do.
It's bringing back the human into it, isn't it? Because we're all so different and we all bring our stories into it, and we're not programs, are we? But by bringing the stories and people's place, it's that creativity, it's that life that you bring back into it, isn't it?
I think it's hard as well because for people that don't know much about plants, they do tend to drive along and see a shrub growing and they think, oh yeah, I'll go and get that, and they take it to their local nursery and they go and end up with Photinia hedges or Pitostrum hedges because everybody has them and they seem to grow in the area. So it really is a bit of a worry in terms of in Australia, well, and across the world, what plants are we growing, and how is that, what's their availability like? Are they the right ones for the area, or are they ones that everyone just knows? So it's kind of that catch-22. Everyone knows, many people know a Photinia hedge, so the sale of Photinia is always high, so Photinia is always grown and other plants aren't. I find it really pretty hard to buy plants. No, I find it really easy to buy plants actually, but to buy the plants that I want, because sometimes I might have to wait a year or two until they're ready, just because they're not, some of the ones that I'm trialing are just not readily available commercially. So you have to kind of go and hunt them out through, someone might know someone who's, been to a nursery that grows something, and so then you're waiting for them to grow it for you. Or I just ask the beautiful Attila and give him some seeds that sort of 6 months later have still not germinated. But I said, if Attila can't germinate them, no one can.
Oh, that's so true, isn't it? He's doing amazing out in his garden. What can we do to help spread the ideas that are coming from the Landscape Conference into the public?
Oh, I'm not I worked in policy, but I'm not, I can't really answer that question because there's so many competing interests that people have about where the public spends its money, where, the public purse is always tight. I am a councillor on the Yass Valley Council, and we recently, agreed or approved some landscape treatments around the council chambers, the new council chambers. And we rejected, thankfully we rejected turf and paths. And so I sort of think if we can bring these little interventions in, and that's why I think that the Melbourne Arts Precinct having a test garden is great. Yes, it's got a lot of money behind it and it's got some great thinkers, but equally there's a whole lot of, Burnley and other places are doing really interesting things through their woody meadows to just let people know that there is other ways of managing landscapes that isn't just all about having the same stuff.
That's amazing. This wouldn't be the Sentimental Gardener podcast without asking you 3 sentimental plants. Do you have a sentimental plant that when you see it, it brings back a memory or has some special meaning for you?
So I have 3 plants and I'll put them into the categories of tree, shrub and bulb.
Okay.
And they all hold memory. They're not necessarily my favourite plant in the garden. I actually have only one of the 3, but they're in my parents' garden. But the first one is the Eucalyptus citriodora. It might be called Corymbia citriodora now. And there is a massive, citriodora, lemon-scented gum, as many know it, in my parents' garden, which was given to my grandparents when the Queen or the former Queen came to visit Canberra when it first opened. And they were given a little seedling and they went home with their little seedling and planted it.
Wow.
And now it's such an enormous tree. And my husband and I were at my parents' house 2 days ago and we tried to wrap our arms around it. And we kind of need 3 people to wrap our arms around it. But when you drive from Canberra to the south coast, you also drive through the corymbias or the lemon-scented gums, they're maculatas, which are closely related to all the spotted gums. And I just love that tree because it's got memory of place, time, people. It smells divine. The cicadas, use it as their home all summer, and they've just got the loudest, like it's just, you can feel that kind of summer beat. The second plant is Viburnum odorata, which is out now. We're, talking in late September, and it's flowering in around Yass, and it was also at my mum's garden because it just is one of those completely nondescript shrubs until that scent comes. And although you sort of think scent for us, it must be just this overwhelming thing for insects to come and pollinate it. And I really, once you smell something, it's hard to stop. Like I can't really articulate its scent because it's a unique thing. But when I smell it, it just is quite it kind of transports me back to the one at my parents' house. And another old-fashioned, so I could be talking about certain natives and things, but these are just plants of memory, are freesias. And, although they might become weedy, it again is about their scent and their beauty. And when my husband and I were married, I had a bouquet of freesias. And so they're the 3 plants that I sort of think, as I said, I only grow freesias of the other 2, but I do go to those plants when I think of plants.
They're so beautiful. Thank you for sharing those.
Thank you.
So, which do you find more challenging? Running a marathon or running a conference?
Oh, well, the quick fire questions. It's interesting because marathon training does well for the conference because you have a long lead up and then it all happens pretty quickly. Like people might think when you run a marathon, it's going to take whatever time it takes, and that's a long day. When you're in the race, it actually happens pretty quickly.
Really?
Yeah. Like there's lots of things to think about, and the same with the conference. It goes really quickly, although, it might be over 2 or 3 days. Every day there's a lot. So they're both equally challenging, but definitely marathon running sets up a discipline and also the mental and physical energy to run it.
Awesome. Okay, if you had a time machine, would you go backwards or forwards, and why?
Would I go backwards or forwards? I like to think I'm forward thinking, and I always think that the adventures are ahead of you, they're not behind you. But I have no real reason other than I'm optimistic. I try to be optimistic about our future, although when you look around and you hear the news, you often don't get it. But look, every civilization has lived through its trials and tribulations, and so we can't say ours is any better or worse than others. It's just you maybe hear about it more.
It's very true. Okay, which garden anywhere in the world has captured your heart, and why?
Well, definitely my parents' garden has, because I've always thought about it as home. But one garden that I really want to take my husband to, and maybe my family, is Great Dixter, because I love Fergus so much. And in some ways it's completely different than my parents' garden, but it was a family garden, and it was gardened in a way that was interesting. It has spunk and it has creativity in every corner. That's not to say it's the garden that I'd replicate, but it definitely has emotion and fun and challenge and kind of a little bit of a warped way of doing things, not doing it, but just, yeah, it's just a really fun garden. Like you can't not, well, I love every visit I've been, I love it. But I also love Fergus Garrett. So, it's a double whammy there.
So good. Okay, one word or sentence to describe how you feel when you're in your garden.
Hard. Sometimes I just feel like there's so much work, but that is actually, I put that in a positive because I like working hard. I mean, people go, oh, why don't you rest, or you shouldn't work so hard? And I'm not saying I'm the hardest worker, but I do love just doing things all the time. And when I'm in it, I feel really proud actually, because I feel that everything in my garden is loved and it has intent. And so nothing, although it's a little bit haphazard in some places, I do feel there has been intent and to try to do something. I mean, Simon Rickard, when he first came here, he said to me, he looked at the front area of my garden, which I still haven't tended to as well as I should. And he said, what were you thinking? And I said, Simon, that's just it. I wasn't thinking. I just went into a nursery and bought all these plants because I don't have many vices, but I can't go past a nursery. And he was like, oh. And so now I've really tried to add a lot of discipline to my thoughts and desires about what's in here. So when I'm in my garden, I try to think, how can I make this a bit something else? Or is that how you want it to look? What do you want it to look like?
So lots of thought behind it. That's amazing.
I don't know if it's amazing, but it's kind of how I am at heart a functionalist. And so, and I think in many ways I'm a modernist. Like I like contemporary thought, which is a really big, open, broad thing. But we're doing this interview just on the veranda, on the eastern veranda of my house. And one thing I did want with my house was it to be a seamless transition between inside and out. So other than a little bit like a tent, so that you could always feel safe, but also a little bit on the edge. So we get storms around here and we get lots of wind. And I wanted it to be an area that you were always aware of the elements, and you always knew that there was no super protected place other than inside. And so that's the way I like to garden, that it's a little bit trying to be on an edge of an idea rather than in the middle.
I love it. Okay, last question. Who is one person, they can either be from history or still alive, that you would love to sit out in your garden with and ask their garden stories or listen to their garden stories?
That's a really good question, because there's a lot of people that I think are great gardeners, and having the Australian Landscape Conference, I get the absolute privilege of listening to people and hearing their stories. One person, and this is just a here and now comment, so it's not the person through the ages, and it's only because I'm thinking about reading their book. Well, no, that's wrong. I'm thinking about buying their book. I then need to get to the next stage of finding time to read it. And that's Thomas Weston, and he's got a book out called The Man Who Planted Canberra. And because I spent 10 years of my life managing, maybe 7 years of my life managing the urban forest, I'm just pretty fascinated with where he found his material, and he worked with Walter Burley Griffin. He really did know his plants or his trees. His plantings were more successful in terms of some plantings are now 100 years old.
Wow.
Than Burley Griffin's, which was interesting because Walter Burley Griffin came from Chicago, and so he was introducing more American. He wanted to introduce more American trees or American native trees, and I thought that Weston, he may not have been, I don't really know anything about his personal life, but super dynamic. But just to think about, he obviously projected forward because he planted some streets with 3 tiers of trees. So he had to kind of visualize spacing, effect, all of these things in a totally new, dry city, and one where there was great hope and optimism in the future. Many of the people that did the planting for Weston were from works programs, so worked for the Dole, well, not for the Dole, but they were part of works programs. And so he had to develop methods of teaching them how to plant trees and all of these things to an unskilled labour force, and retain this vision of making something beautiful with longevity that expressed Australia and also expressed other linkages to other, cultures and people. So that's just a here now. I'll probably wake up tomorrow morning and think of somebody else.
No, that's wonderful. And so with the Australian Landscape Conference, when will the next one be?
It's a biennial event, so it's March 2027.
Okay, awesome. So we'll keep our eyes out for the information about that. Have you already got your guest speakers lined up, or are you still thinking about who to invite?
It's a significant undertaking.
Yeah.
No, I don't have all my speakers lined up because we're now about, 16 months out. I definitely have people that I would like to come, and sometimes they're not available in 1 year, so you might ask them for another year. So I've run 3 Australian landscape conferences, and the conference itself started in 1998.
Right.
I had misjudged that. I thought it was in the 2000s, but that was when the previous owners had it. So working out who's coming and can they come is quite an extensive process, but it's good because you get to, I get to look at their work. I read, I inquire. So I really want to build it into, or, continue it as being an outstanding event where conversations happen that are important. It's not just about looking for beauty. It's really about trying to share our ideas about landscape so that we can use it as a vehicle for improving our cities, improving our towns, improving people's lives. I'm on the board of an aged care facility in Yass, and we have a board meeting tonight, and they have a garden of memories garden, which really makes me a bit sad when I go in there, and I know that I shouldn't say that, but it's all full of plants that people have brought in from their houses. So people are going from their domestic house into an aged care facility, which is a fabulous facility. But it's not a curated story. It's like Rose,
Yeah.
Something else,
Yeah.
something else. And I just, I strongly feel that we can make these places in aged care facilities, in a whole range of areas, small interventions or interventions with thought, with skill, experience, much better outcomes for people that live in them.
Yeah, there's so much we could talk about there, but I think, like you said, it's so important. I used to work in aged care as a nurse and have seen the power firsthand of like people with nature. But like you said, you got to think about how do you create that immersive experience for people at that older age and, different challenges with bodies and all that stuff. So wonderful work. Thank you for doing that work. And thank you so much for driving the Landscape Conference to be what it is, because this podcast I don't think would be here without that, because it was an idea before I went there, and then through there I met some people and pitched my idea and said, do you think this would work? And I met so many people that just encouraged me to try. Not like, you'll be great, you'll be amazing. Just try and see what happens. A bit of the same as gardening. Just try and see what happens. So I really want to just express my gratitude for that, because you never know what comes out of these experiences for people, do you? Like when you're like, yeah, we're going to talk about gardens, but there's so much more that can happen between people and with the networking as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cass. And I just think it's, fabulous what you're doing, because as I said, I generally listen to people before I read their work. And it's really great having an opportunity to talk about influences or to think them, because many of us do. Some of us have a bit of time to sit back and reflect, but I find I've always just jumped in and done things. Your strength is also your weakness. And so being able to sit back and reflect has been marvellous. And I wish you the very best. And we've given you the most beautiful day. And yes, if it could rain tomorrow, we'd be very happy, because we would need some rain here. But it's just a beautiful time to be here. And if you go a little bit further down the road, you'll start to see all the cropping country coming into spring, which looks pretty amazing as well.
Thank you so much, Fleur.
Thank you.
After we finished recording this conversation, I got to walk around Fleur's garden and take some photographs, and her words really sat with me, especially something that kept returning to me. She spoke about her grandmother, who lost her husband in a bushfire when he was 42. And instead of retreating, this woman, Fleur's grandmother, decided to remake the garden, to plant something, to create beauty from grief. That act of remaking, that choice to tend rather than turn away, it's threaded through everything Fleur does. Whether she's walking through a country town, dismayed by McDonald's-style parks, or standing before a council decision about landscape design, or sitting on the aged care facility board, troubled by unloved gardens, there's always this underlying commitment that how we shape our landscapes reflects our values, and we have a responsibility to choose with care. The landscapes we inherit and the ones we leave behind are never neutral. They're telling a story about what we believe is worth sustaining, about whether we've chosen beauty, intention, and connection, or whether we've just accepted what's easy. What struck me most about Fleur is this: she doesn't separate the personal from the civic, the poetic from the practical. A garden holds memory and serves ecology. A park is art and infrastructure. A conference is a gathering place and a laboratory for new ideas. So here's my invitation for you today. Look at the land around you, your garden, your street, your park, or your city. And don't just ask, is this beautiful? But ask, what is this saying about what we value? And then ask the harder question, what would change if we looked after it differently? Because Fleur's work whether it's managing a million trees or curating conversations or simply asking better questions, reminds us that change doesn't happen in the abstract. It happens when someone decides to show up locally, repeatedly, with thought and skill and care. Small interventions, big ripples. You can learn more about Fleur's work through Outlandish Ventures. They run events, curated tours, and host the Australian Landscape Conference, with the next gathering in March 2027. You'll find links to these in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's conversation, consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps other people find these podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Colin and Deb, who are Substack founding member paid supporters. And if you're interested in becoming a paid supporter of the podcast, just Google the Sentimental Gardener Substack. A huge thank you to Hayden Schuler from Varaya Gardening for the theme music, and to my husband Tom Dowding for audio engineering. This podcast was recorded on the traditional lands of the Ngunnawal and Wiradjuri people. I pay my respect to elders past and present, and I honour their ongoing care of this country. I'm Cass Dowding, and this is the Sentimental Gardener podcast.